Just another Monday morning. Traffic building on the freeways, coffee shops opening their doors, people heading to work without a second thought. But in a narrow alley behind Santa Monica Boulevard in West Hollywood, a homeless man had just opened a dumpster, and what he found inside stopped him cold. 2 plastic bags were discovered, and inside them, the remains of a human being, a life cut tragically short. He closed the dumpster, stepped back, and stood there in complete silence for a moment because his brain was refusing to process what his eyes had just seen. Then he ran. Within minutes, police cruisers were filling the alley. One by one, officers approached the dumpster and looked inside. And one by one, even the most experienced among them flinched. Detective Wendy Burnt, a seasoned homicide investigator, arrived on scene and later said she had never been able to shake what she saw that morning. "It was just so heinous," she said. "I felt it was my responsibility to solve this." The rest of the body was never found, and here is the detail that makes everything heavier. Whoever was in those plastic bags, they had been loved. They had been someone's whole world. They had plans for next week. They had a sister waiting for them in Las Vegas. They had a poem sitting unfinished somewhere. His name was William Arnold Newton, and almost everyone who knew him called him Billy. July 26, 1965. Eau Claire, Wisconsin. That is where Billy's story begins. A mid-sized city in the northern part of the state, surrounded by flat land and long winters, the kind of place where stability feels like a given for most people. But Billy Newton never got that version of Eau Claire. His parents were never married. His father, Richard Harriman, was largely absent from the beginning. And from an early age, Billy learned something that no child should have to learn, that the people who are supposed to anchor you can leave without warning. He attended grade school and junior high in Eau Claire. Then his mother moved them to Ladysmith, Wisconsin, then to Oklahoma City. 3 cities before he was 16. Every time something started to feel familiar, they packed up and left it behind. But here is what the geography misses. Between those cities, Billy was quietly becoming someone. He read everything he could get his hands on. He wrote poetry, not casually, but seriously, the way someone writes when words are the only thing that feels honest. Friends who knew him later in life said he never saw himself as a porn actor, never saw himself as a performer. He saw himself as an artist. The adult industry was just how he paid the bills. The poetry was who he actually was. Wisconsin's cold gave way to Oklahoma's heat, and with every mile, Billy didn't just change his address. He left pieces of himself behind in places that never gave him a reason to stay. At 16, he made a decision. He was done moving on someone else's terms. If his father was in Eau Claire, then Eau Claire was where he was going. He packed what he had, traveled back to his hometown, and knocked on Richard Harriman's door. He was 16 years old, alone, and his father would open that door and let him in. Richard opened it. Then he slammed it shut. The sound of that door echoed for the next 3 years of Billy Newton's life. Because that single moment, a father looking at his 16-year-old son and turning him away, didn't just reject Billy. It fundamentally rewired how Billy understood the world. Not with bitterness, not with collapse, but with a quiet, devastating clarity. No one was coming to save him. Whatever life he was going to have, he was going to have to build it entirely alone. That night, when he stepped off that porch, he wasn't just a boy who'd been rejected. He was someone who had stopped waiting for permission to exist. For the next 3 years, Billy Newton moved through America with almost nothing. No safety net, no plan, no adult in his corner. Just a teenager surviving on instinct and sheer will. Eventually, he landed in Oklahoma City. And for the first time in a long time, the world gave him something back. He met a man named Terry Elliott, his first real romantic relationship. And that steadiness, that simple human steadiness, gave Billy enough ground beneath his feet to start building. He earned his GED. He discovered a genuine talent for beauty and makeup. He threw himself into learning the craft properly, skincare, technique, color, and walked out with his beautician license. He was good, naturally, effortlessly good at it. But Oklahoma City had a ceiling for someone like Billy. He was gay in an era when being gay in Middle America meant living carefully, quietly, partially hidden. He was an artist in a city that didn't have much space for what he was making. And somewhere in the back of his mind, one city kept surfacing: Los Angeles. In 1984, Billy Newton arrived in Los Angeles, 19 years old, no connections, very little money, and no guarantee that any of it was going to work. But West Hollywood in the mid-1980s was unlike anything Billy had ever experienced. For gay men especially, it was the closest thing to a world built specifically for them. Visible, loud, unapologetically alive. After years of moving through places that never quite fit, Billy Newton had finally found somewhere that felt like it was made for people like him. He found work doing makeup and choreography for a music video production company. He got hired, he built a routine, he earned his GED from the LA Unified School District in 1989, years after most people his age, but he got there. From a teenager standing on a doorstep that wouldn't open, to a young man carving out a real life in one of the most competitive cities on earth. That is who was in that dumpster on October 29, 1990. Not a headline, not a statistic. A poet who had survived things that would have destroyed most people. A 25-year-old who had built his entire life from scratch, with nothing, starting at 16. And somewhere in the city that had finally given him a home, something was already moving toward him. Something that had been watching him for longer than he knew. By 1987, Billy Newton had built something most people only dream about. His name was on a production company. His hands were behind the camera, entire creative vision of everything they put out. He was 22 years old, and he had turned nothing into something through sheer force of will. But the same city that gave him everything was quietly stalking him. It started at the Hollywood Spa, 1650 Ivar Avenue. One of the largest gay bathhouses in Los Angeles, 100 rooms, 100,000 visitors a year. A place where West Hollywood's underground world came to breathe. Late nights, dimly lit hallways, a community that existed almost entirely outside the view of the rest of the city. That is where he met Mark Robbins. Mark went by David Ray in the industry. Adult film producer, experienced, connected, and the moment he met Billy, he saw something, not just looks, a natural instinct for atmosphere, for making a room feel like something it was not. Billy could walk into an ordinary apartment and redecorate it so completely that on camera it looked like an entirely different world. Mark recognized that immediately. What started as professional became personal. London Ray Productions was born in 1987. And with it, two versions of Billy Newton, Bill E. London behind the camera, Billy London in front of it. Producer, makeup artist, set designer, on-screen talent, all at once. But the credits never showed the truth. Billy never thought of himself as a porn actor, not once. He thought of himself as an artist, doing what he had to do to survive. The work paid the bills. The poetry was the real thing. He carried both versions of himself everywhere he went, and very few people ever got to see which one was real. Then the city started changing around him. By the late 1980s, West Hollywood was living inside a quiet terror. The AIDS crisis had been building for years, and by 1990 it had hollowed out entire sections of the community Billy called home. Rachel Mason, who would later spend 6 years investigating his murder, described the moment she saw a gay newspaper from that exact era. Page after page of young men's faces. Obituaries. Row after row of obituaries. AIDS, 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 murder, she said. I was so disgusted. You can't have a murder in this sea of people already dying. Billy moved through this world every single day. He went to the clubs, and he danced, and he laughed, and he also quietly counted who wasn't there anymore. Fear had settled into everything, into conversations, into decisions, into the way people looked at each other across a room. The community was defiant, loudly, beautifully defiant. But underneath that defiance was a grief that never fully got to rest. In 1988, Los Angeles County ordered all bathhouses closed, including the Hollywood Spa, the place where Billy had built his first real foothold in this city, gone overnight, and with it, a significant piece of his financial stability. The pressure started mounting, quietly at first, then less quietly. By the summer of 1990, the life Billy had built was showing its cracks. He and Mark were falling apart. The relationship that had anchored him